You know, it just kind of says a lot that the only people who are talking about this recent debate between Norman Finkelstein and a guy that, I don't know, I've just never really heard of him before. I'm not quite sure of his name, but neither was Norman Finkelstein, really. Mr. Bennell, Mr. Fratelli, Mr. Spaghetti, I don't know. But the only people who are talking about this are online. Literally, absolutely zero people. In the sort of organizing pro-Palestinian march sort of, I guess,
Yeah, I
scene
mean, like,
are talking about any of this stuff.
I feel like the amount of online debates that have actually kind of like achieved anything like at all is is pretty low. It's pretty low, right? Like, I mean, the the, the one that I saw that well, the one that I saw kind of fallout from that I thought was pretty interesting was when was it Peterson and Zizek did that debate, and it was so funny seeing how Peterson didn't know anything about what he was talking about or whatever, that that Zizek kind of just like completely relaxed and just like had a laugh and kind of had fun or whatever, and then the all the Peterson subreddits just went into total meltdown, and they were just like, wait a minute, this guy that we've been following all this time, he's been telling us these things and he doesn't know what he's talking about. um so I feel like, yeah, best case scenario, a lot of these things can be kind of like, just like an own goal sort of thing.
It's just if you want to watch it, like, don't watch it to think that, like, yeah, this group of like old men and one not so old man talking about this stuff, they're not gonna like solve the problem, they're not gonna change anyone's minds. You should only watch it to hear Norman Finkelstein say things like, Mr. Bennell, have some humility, you are an idiot, a fantastic moron. That's the only reason that you should watch it.
Yeah. We got, yeah, like, I mean, it's Finkelstein being Finkelstein. He's great on Palestine, not so great on other stuff. So,
well, this is another thing to talk about, right? Because he's just like I've never. It's so funny that well, it's not funny. I think it's quite depressing for a lot of people to find out that he's a reactionary. But I've never ever saw him as anything other than like my dad if he knew a bit more about Palestine, right? Do you know what I mean?
I mean, I think that's like a thing, right? It's like he is pretty kind of reactionary. He's definitely got a lot of like really conservative views, all that kind of stuff. But he understands Israel and Palestine in a way that a lot of other people that think like him and talk like him and all that kind of stuff don't, because they've just been brainwashed by all the other propaganda or whatever. So it's kind of like, for him to be like a, to be a shitty dude with shitty opinions but still get it, kind of speaks to like how propagandized too that a lot of the other people that are also pretty reactionary are, right? Like, but yeah, I mean, I think it's he's a good voice on those things, and some of his scholarly output on Palestine and Gaza and the conflict is like unmatched. He's put like so much work in to really thoroughly kind of debunk a lot of that kind of stuff, which is good, great. But yeah, he's still just like the boomer uncle or dad in a lot of ways, where you're just like, as soon as he starts talking about anything else, you're like, oh, right, okay, cool, all right.
Yeah, I'm not gonna go to him for my like pro LGBTQ plus allyship content.
Yeah. I mean, like, he's just like, he's got an area that he's very good in, and the rest we just won't talk about.
As some people are saying in the chat, grab a bag of cans. It's lads' night. It's boys' night. It's boys' night here on Red Planet.
No cans, just tea.
Just like a cup of tea and a mug that says Cat Dad. As me and Tim are both cat dads, actually.
I don't think I've ever actually I was gonna say, I don't think I've ever had any kind of like, intoxicant or anything like that while doing Red Planet. But then I do actually remember there was one time that I had a can of those like little pre-mixed margarita things.
Oh yeah.
I think it was like just because I was like really dehydrated, and it was like in my fridge, and it was like the last one, and it was like super crisp and cold, and I was
Did you have it in the morning?
Yeah, it was
In case anyone doesn't know, Tim records these shows in the morning. Bless him.
Yeah, yeah.
We have like tried to discuss a later start time for him, but it would mean that everybody else would be like waking up at 3 in the morning or something.
It's it's like the kind of thing where it's like it's not, not really enough to like get a buzz from it or anything. It was purely just like it was like an ultimate lads move of like I could have gotten like anything else. I could have prepared some drink. I could have had ice water with a little bit of lemon in it, but I was like, no.
Lads, 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 lads.
So that's where I was at that time.
Great, great news.
But now we're in a very different time.
Yes. Tim, tell us about the most base thing you did this week or last week, because you weren't here last week, or have I forgotten that you were here last week? I can't remember.
Yeah, no, I wasn't last week. I wasn't. I was. Yeah, I had to work actually. I had so I had a client that was coming up, and it was like kind of like tied into a death in the family, and we were doing some like traditional Maori tattoos and stuff. So I kind of had to take the day for that. Very important thing. So what would it be? I don't know. Just probably. Actually, I'm gonna just like cop out and say like doing the traditional Maori tattoos was the most space thing I did last week. I did a couple, but the ones that I was doing for instead of being on here were actually really important. They were especially for I have a lot of clients that are takatapui, which is kind of like an overarching kind of Maori term for like queer or like that kind of stuff. And there's like a lot of people that are uncomfortable because sometimes like that kind of scene for like for tamoku can be kind of like a bit broy and a little bit like there's like a lot of people that wouldn't like they're not gonna like hassle someone for being queer or whatever like that, but they would definitely be like, well, I just don't get it, sort of thing like that. So yeah, I think I get a lot of people coming to me for that kind of stuff, which I think is cool. And it always feels good to kind of empower people in our community, because when we're doing these traditional tattoos, a lot of the patterns have like special meanings that kind of speak to not just like the ancestry, but also kind of like the personal journey of the person that is receiving them. And so there is kind of like a visual language that we like, and it's always in a constant state of development, right? Because it's not like a static culture that we've developed certain like patterns or even using certain motifs in certain ways to kind of like reflect a person's queer identity. So it's always great, like, sitting down with people and talking about it, like, okay, we're going to use this because this, represents like this about like, like gender or, like something like that, or, like even speaking to specific kind of like, whether it's like ancestors or like cosmological figures like gods, or we call them atua, that are like relevant to their kind of, I guess, their I don't know, their sexuality or gender identity and stuff. So yeah, I think that's cool, and it's always great to kind of when you're doing this for people to be able to connect them with, because not every Maori person knows like what all the different patterns mean and stuff. So when you're putting them on people, you're explaining, okay, this means this is whatever. So then to kind of like also give them the tools to like go back, to their family or to their friends and stuff and be like, okay, well, like we use this symbol takarangi because it speaks to like a balance of like masculine and feminine, or like, like things like that, which is really cool because it's kind of like helping like spread these things out, and then they go to their friends and they're like, hey, well, like I have this which means this, and blah blah blah. And yeah, I think it kind of makes people feel a lot more, I guess, like at home in their bodies, but also at home in the culture, like there's like with our traditional arts and stuff, there is a place for like queer people to engage with that. And it's not like the boys club that it was for a little while there. So yeah, I'm gonna say that was my most based
That's definitely
thing.
based. Hell yeah.
And the recipient was also a part of the Greens Party down here, so that's great. And yeah, and it's been Pride Month as well. So whoa.
Oh shit! No way! Pride Month in Aotearoa is
Yeah.
like March.
Yeah, that was awesome. What about you? What's been the most basic thing? I know you're gonna come out with something. You're gonna be like, did you like physically remove a bailiff from like an elderly refugee's home?
No.
You didn't.
Nothing that base this week. No.
Took a week off then. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I didn't do anything this week. No. This week has been fairly interesting based wise stuff because there have been there's sort of like a lot of disputes ongoing at the moment with the tenants union that are like they're reaching a zenith point of like where we're about to do action. The way that these things work, the way that we do them with GMTU, and we think that this is how they're dealt with in most tenants unions in the UK. So London Renters Union and CATU and Living Rent do things in a similar way. We send out letter. I've always spoken about these letters. We send out a letter with our demands. But after that, generally speaking, we enter into like a bit of a back and forth with a letting agent or landlord. And there's been probably 3 examples of that happening this week where we've had back and forth with landlords, just essentially like the only thing that we say back to them, because they always, speaking of debates, they always try and debate us on the facts and say things like, oh, well, your member is lying actually, and they did this and blah, blah, blah. But it's always inconsequential, right? Because if they say like, oh, they're lying about this, what they're trying to do is they're trying to appeal to us as a company, but we're not a company. We're a union, right? So we're not interested in whatever our tenant has said that might not be true in the past about this or whatever. What we're interested in is all the laws that you have broke in this tenancy. So that are like, landlord responsibility, letting agent responsibility, housing association responsibility. So they will try and debate us, but we always respond with, this response is unsatisfactory. Please respond within X time frame, otherwise we'll take further action. And we've had like basically 2 of that are at that second stage, and they've responded saying, "Well, if you do anything, we're gonna take you to court." And they can't take you to court for like union direct action with like public facing stuff. It's such a joke. It's like they really think that they're saying something because they think that we're trying to take them to court, but that's never the case. We don't have the resources for that. We have a relationship with Greater Manchester Law Centre, but that is in a very small remit of situations where we just can't deal with the complex legal stuff surrounding like an eviction or someone needing to get rehoused or something like that. So it's very rare. And even then, like they don't normally go to court, or if they do go to court, it's on a legal aid basis. So it's a lot more complex than that. Lots of these places just like to be like, we will sue you, or like they'll just keep on debating. Or in one of the disputes this week, there was a property manager who said, we understand all this. We're just waiting for the landlord to respond. And it's like, no. You don't understand. You work on behalf of the fucking landlord. So you have to fucking deal with this. It's part of your job. It's part of your agreement as a property manager. So there's all these like disputes that have gotten to this escalated bit. And so it isn't even really me. It's just, I've helped train these people, but like the growing member solidarity team in GMTU has been really good, because we're now at a stage where some people that I've trained earlier this year are now organizing phone blockades. So we've got a phone blockade going on this week with one of the disputes, and that's going to be really interesting. It's essentially, for people who don't know, it's where you ring a letting agent. And so with this, particularly in the UK, obviously you can't like phone anyone's personal number. It has to be a business number, because if you're phoning someone's personal number, that's harassment, and you can get in a lot of trouble for that. But if you're phoning like a business, like a letting agent or a housing association, they have to answer the phone. It's a business, and we are concerned members of the public who are exercising our right to ask them why they aren't dealing with our members' issues. And so that's kind of one way that you could do direct action with letting agents in the UK. If that doesn't work, we're probably going to try and do a march on the boss, which is basically like we go into the letting agent, we sit down, we get sandwiches out, we get thermos flasks out, so they know that we're going to be there until shit gets sorted. And then we have someone outside of the letting agent handing out flyers like, don't come in here, it's shit, don't bother, join the union. So yeah, we got a lot of stuff planned this week regarding that. We got some public shaming stuff on the go. I don't know if I mentioned there's this one guy who's like a landlord influencer, and we're gonna be doing a lot of stuff about him. Yeah.
We spoke about that like 2 weeks ago, about the ups and downs of all that kind of stuff. But
yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. So we got that going on, and I think that's it. Yeah, that's pretty much it for tenant union stuff this week. I feel like there was something else, but I've completely forgotten about it, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, thanks very much. Thanks very much for asking. But we also have a returning based viewer. Incredible.
We do.
So Molly says that the leaders of her organization have recently kicked out an entire faction of more radical voices as to make the organization appeal more to less left-leaning people. Thus, me and a bunch of people in the organization have begun organizing to kick out every leader in the organization and replace them with radical people so we can focus more on action and less on debate. That's fantastic. Great shit, Molly. I love to hear it. And I think that I really like this one in particular, because this proves a lot of what we've been saying on Red Planet about if you're worried about getting into a union and they don't have particularly the best politics, the best ideologues, the best, attitudes towards, X topic or whatever, you can organize within that union and make things more radical. It's far easier than trying to push, I don't know, Joe Biden left. You can push your organization that's actually doing stuff and that you have a democratic voice in left. So fantastic, great stuff, Molly.
Yeah, awesome. Great work. So we always want to know what kind of base things you've been doing. So you can message us on Twitter, Instagram, or TikTok, or just send an email through to based@redplanetshow.com. Include your name and pronouns if you're cool with that, and we may shout you out in a later episode. Cool.
Was in.
Well, so we should get into the news for this week. This whole episode is kind of going to be a news thing, but what we're going to do is we're going to start with just the actual recent news like we do every week. But then after that, we're going to get into talking about other like recent wins that the left have had all around the world, just things like good things that have happened that we may have missed in the news as they were developing at the time. So it's all going to be stuff from recent history, but we're going to start off with the things that are kind of actually happening right now. So to kick that off, I'm going to start with talking a little bit about what's happening with TikTok at the moment over in the States. So I'm probably like, I don't even use TikTok. So
Tim, you're an amazing poster. I can't believe you're on TikTok. There's a lot of good posting on there.
Like I do, like people send me them all the time and I check them out and all that kind of stuff. But like I don't actually like, I don't make. I actually know one time I made a Red Planet TikTok for us when we first kicked off that. I did. That's my sole TikTok experience. So I'm not up to date with all the the TikTok stuff, but I've been keeping an eye on what's happening in the news because I think it's a pretty interesting case of America being America. But so this week the US House of Representatives passed a bill which has the potential to result in a nationwide ban of social media platform TikTok. So, if this goes into law, the bill, which overwhelmingly passed with broad bipartisan support, would require that TikTok's China-based parent company, ByteDance, sell the platform to new owners in the United States to continue operations. So that's pretty wild, right? So the American government is trying to make a law where they say this foreign company, if they want to operate in our country, which is obviously a huge part of their market, then they have to sell it to an American company, which is wild. Like there was if there was anyone else doing that in the world, America would be like, this is tyrannical, And earlier in the year when we saw, or like actually no, late last year, we saw those like all the court proceedings where they were kind of grilling these executives and they were saying like, are you a member of the Chinese Communist Party? Have you ever spied for them? And the dude was just repeating, he's like, once again, I'm Singaporean, I have nothing, and they were just like over and over again asking him the same things. It was pretty clear that none of the people asking him questions actually had any idea about like the structure of the business or anything. So that was pretty wild. But yeah, so publicly, supporters of the bill claim that the app represents a threat to US security, pointing to concerns about the dissemination of misinformation and collected data being used to spy on Americans. What has not been made clear is how TikTok's practices differ from the other US-based social media companies. So this is the thing, right? It's like if it was, if it's a Meta, if it's like, if it's any of these companies that are based in America, the total, like the framing of it is completely different. Sometimes they'll talk about like, oh, well, like this company is like it's unethical or it's doing something dodgy or like, they're doing whatever, but it's never from this thing of like they are spying. Like this is, like this is it, and it's wild because there are so many American companies that legitimately are like taking the same data and very openly selling it to whoever wants to buy it. So like it is interesting how these other US based social media companies haven't had that same kind of scrutiny. It's yeah, it's I don't know. I think it's pretty transparent what's happening there.
Yeah.
So yeah, TikTok is the fastest growing social media app in the world with more than 170 million US accounts. Over the last year in particular, it has developed into a valuable news and information delivery service largely disconnected from mainstream media, filling some of the void left by Elon Musk's acquisition and subsequent transformation of Twitter. So that's the thing, right? Like there have been, I mean, we do see that there is a lot of just like weird conspiratorial kind of stuff that gets spread on there, which, obviously sucks. And there's a lot of reactionary content there. But we also see on platforms like TikTok and even on Snapchat, there was a lot of stuff coming out about what was happening in Gaza, for instance. Like a lot of stuff about Israel and Palestine was coming out directly, like straight from people, straight from Palestinian people in Gaza or other people around the world that knew what was going on. And it was like there's no middleman or anything like that. It's just people just straight up putting information out there, recording terrible things that were happening as they were happening, and just putting it directly out there. And that was, I mean, it's like a huge counter to all of the propaganda that Israel are putting out as well. Like they're putting out TikToks as well, except they're just these like really cringe rehearsed, like weird things or whatever. And so they're putting out these videos that are obviously like very, staged and rehearsed. Whereas you're seeing stuff from literally from the ground in Gaza. You're seeing people like posting or like people posting on their behalf, people getting them eSIMs so that they could post, and all this kind of stuff where they're legitimately showing like there's no rehearsal here, there's no whatever, like this is footage from a hospital, this is footage from a bombing as it is happening, things like that. So it's that kind of unfiltered access to that video content, and for those people to be able to talk in, put it out there in their own words, has been a huge counter to the misinformation and the propaganda. Like we even see what happened with that young Yemeni dude who was just making videos going out to the captured boats, and how like you can imagine 10 years ago no one would have seen any of that. we would just have to, we just have to see what the New York Times said about, you know, about those guys in Yemen. So, yeah, so that's been huge.
I think as well, like alongside it, there are lots of people who, because they don't have access to a PC and editing software, they've become content creators on TikTok and they've been making money. And it's like, okay, well, all right, if a lot of your audience is in the USA, and if you're in the USA, all of a sudden you're out of a fucking job. And there's also that to consider as well, because I know that people might think, oh well, TikTok stars, they get loads of money and they're all millionaires. Well, it's just so far from the truth. They're like, very similar to, like, content creators on Twitch, like, just barely scraping by on like maybe less than minimum wage kind of thing. So you got that to consider too.
Like, that's the thing, and there are so many people whose businesses rely on social media, like whatever, like your cousin with a candle business or whatever, it's just like,
Yeah.
so it's huge. So this is going to have huge ramifications on people, and I think it's kind of silly to think about, but sometimes these things can be really kind of radicalizing moments for people, where they go like, why are they banning TikTok? Why, like, look into it, and they're like, all of a sudden, you know start pulling on a thread. So yeah, so that's pretty yeah, I don't know. I think it's going to be, either way, it's going to be a huge kind of eye-opening thing. Yeah, absolutely wild. But yeah, so I mean, while the House bill sailed through, it is expected that the Senate is not going to be so hasty. There's a number of senators who have been working on their own legislation aimed at, and seemingly only at, TikTok, who would like to get credit and would need to be convinced. The Senate also may make some revisions to the existing bill and send it back to the House, which might not prevent the passage of the bill, but it could take weeks to accomplish. And theoretically, the Senate has higher priorities, including preventing a partial government shutdown before the end of this coming week. So, meanwhile, the rats are coming out of the woodwork, eager to try and acquire the massive platform for themselves. Former Trump Treasury Secretary and producer of Mad Max Fury Road, Steven Mnuchin, has expressed interest in forming a group of investors to make a bid. The notoriously abusive former CEO of Activision Blizzard, King Bobby Kotick, also in the Epstein flight logs, has expressed a similar desire. The White House has reportedly tried to convince a group of talent agencies to attempt a purchase, including Creative Artist Agency and Viral Nation. Companies contracted with creators and influencers on the platform who would certainly not abuse their ownership to exploit these relationships unethically. Clearly, TikTok is going to be in good hands no matter what happens. So that is the thing, right? So they're forcing a sale, but they're not saying the government is going to buy it. They're saying an American, some kind of American corporation must take it over. And, like, I mean, I feel like they'll engineer a deal regardless. But yeah, I mean, this is a huge thing. Like, so yeah, if one of these like Creative Artist Agency or Viral Nation or whatever take over, then to be a company that kind of manages creators and to do all this kind of stuff directly assumes control of the platform, then it's like, okay, your entire thing is going to change, right? um so there's a good reason for people that are just users of TikTok to be pretty skeptical of that. Yeah, so assuming ByteDance is willing to sell, that is, the legislation provides 180 days for a sale to be completed, which is a very short period of time for a multi-billion-dollar transaction to be negotiated. They may also hold out hope for an inevitable Supreme Court case, which will rule in their favor on First Amendment grounds. But this is far from a guarantee, due to the proposed goal of the legislation to protect national security, which has historically often trumped free speech concerns, even among far less conservative courts than the one currently in power. So yeah, so there's this thing again where it's like we see these like national security things that completely override everything when you really look at it, and it's like, is this actually national security? So like the classic thing is for a government to grant itself special tools in the interests of like, yeah, national security, fighting terrorism, whatever, and then just use them in, ridiculous cases to, make them like to like entrench their own power, to, like make favorable business deals. Like I wonder what Nancy Pelosi's stock portfolio is looking like right now. She's probably like, she's ringing up her like, like 14-year-old nephew asking about social media companies, whatever. Yeah, so that's wild, right? So this Singaporean company being effectively strong-armed by the American government to give up its business, and I mean, it's like it's a sale, yeah. So even if it goes through, they'll make billions and billions of dollars. But it's like, being forced to sell something on someone else's terms is pretty wild. And it's pretty interesting to see a lot of Tea Party libertarian types like absolutely getting in on this. And it's like, oh, okay, like so that kind of government overreach is acceptable when it's against the enemies. But you know, we've never known them to be ideologically consistent, have we? Uh, well, why don't you, moving on from that, why don't you give us a little bit of an update on what's happening over in the UK Parliament?
Yeah, it's normal stuff as always, Tim. This week I'm going to be talking very briefly about some electoral politics stuff in the UK because I think it's important. This is about Diane Abbott being snubbed in the UK Parliament after misogynistic racist threats from Tory donor Frank Hester. So over a week ago, British MP for Hackney in East London, Diane Abbott, was referred to by one of the biggest Tory party donors, Frank Hester, as making you want to hate all black women. To be clear, the statement was not over a week ago. This was revealed over a week ago. The statement was from 2019, but I'll talk a bit more about that now. Hester, who donated £10 million to the Conservative Party from his vast accumulation of wealth gained from, yep, you guessed it, cronyism, his private firm being paid £400 million to look after 60 million British people's health records. So if you're not sure what I'm referring to there is a bit of a trend amongst Tory donors being put in positions where their private companies are in charge of public health stuff. So yeah, the NHS basically being sold off and privatized bit by bit over the years. And this is one example of it. And this is the kind of guy that they're giving that kind of responsibility to. So yeah, looking after, his private firm paid £400 million to look after 60 million British people's health records. He stated in a meeting in 2019 that, quote, "It's like trying not to be racist, but you see Diane Abbott on the TV and you're just like, you just want to hate all black women because she's there. And I don't hate all black women at all, but I think she should be shot." These revelations, yeah, I know, it's fucked. These revelations from a Guardian investigation caused an uproar in Parliament, with Labour demanding that Rishi Sunak and other Conservative ministers return the £10 million from Hester's donations to show solidarity with black women all over Britain, but they have continually hand-waved the remarks. Abbott is Britain's first black woman elected to Parliament and is also its longest-serving black MP, being elected in Hackney over 35 years ago, where she served her constituency continually since that day. She's been subject to racism her entire career, and outside of that too. She was set to be the Chancellor of the Exchequer under Jeremy Corbyn's cabinet should he win the 2019 election, and was repeatedly mocked for supposedly getting budget numbers wrong during high-stakes TV interviews amidst accusations of anti-Semitism rising in the party during Corbyn's campaign years. Abbott, who has been suspended by Labour under Keith Starmer for saying that black people suffer a different kind of racism to Jewish, Irish, and traveller communities, was also denied the opportunity to speak during a debate about her behaviour 46 times by Speaker of the House Lindsay Hoyle this week, who has also recently sparked controversy by denying the SNP's vote on a ceasefire in Gaza. Obviously, at Red Planet, we're not entirely supportive of the electoral politics system. But I think that this story is important because it shows that Black women, even when they, achieve a position of, I guess, somewhat power in this country, are still subject to vile misogynoir. Just every single opportunity. There have been so many. When I mentioned in this story earlier, like, she's been subject to racism all throughout her career, like obviously stuff in the 80s and the 90s, but when it comes to recently, there've been bizarre stories about her in various different newspapers, like because she was caught drinking a gin and tonic out of a can, one of those cans, those pre-mixed cans Tim's quite familiar with. Literally just drinking one of those on the bus home. She was literally taking the bus home in London and having a fucking gin and tonic, and everyone went mental. It was ridiculous. Or she was on a train or something. I can't remember.
Yeah. We'll be getting a lot of that about like Greens MPs and down here as well. It'd be like, a Green MP will be like caught like drinking at a bar with their friends and getting a little bit rowdy, but like not actually causing any trouble, and it's like, okay, well, like I'm sure a lot worse goes on that we could be we could be talking about. But
this is it. We in the UK, we genuinely have inquiries that have gone into Boris Johnson having parties during lockdown, and all these various different government institution workers like spreading COVID, like doing like super spreader events and shit like that. Obviously, probably not a super spreader event, but they're getting about while everybody else is being forced to like stay in. And it's just one of those fucking situations, right? Yeah, absolutely horrific, absolutely ridiculous. Solidarity with Diane Abbott, in her as her social class as a black woman, but obviously like being an MP is a bit of like,
yeah. Let's just say instead solidarity with anyone drinking a pre-mixed alcoholic beverage on public transport.
Yes, as always, as always. But Tim, tell us a little bit about what's going on in Gaza right now.
Yeah, so I mean, we've been kind of updating, constantly with all the little developments that are going on over there with Israel's invasion of Gaza and ongoing occupation of Palestinian land. So at the moment, it's been Ramadan. So if you don't know, Ramadan is the 9th month in the Muslim calendar, and it's like it's kind of like a holy season sort of thing, where it's a period where they believe in this month, this is when the Quran came down to earth from heaven. And so during this month, Muslims generally fast during the day, so through sunlight hours from dawn till sunset. So they don't eat anything, they don't drink, not even water or anything until the sun goes down. And it's kind of like I guess like a reflection on like a spiritual discipline, as well as kind of empathizing with people that can't eat or drink. And it's like it's a pretty, like, religious fasting is a pretty common thing for a lot of like all the Abrahamic religions, and also for Buddhism and stuff. But so they've been doing that this month for Ramadan, but it's kind of like this double thing where it's like they're already a starving people over there, right? Like, it's like if you were doing like if you were fasting anywhere else in the world, it's like these were the people that you would be kind of thinking about, like these are the poor unfortunate people that don't have food or water, that you would be like kind of like thinking about as part of your religious practice. So it's like amazing that they were even doing this in the first place, to keep up with this kind of like restrictive practice through a period of like of really extreme deprivation anyway. So so normally like during the day they would fast, and then at nighttime they would break their fast with a small meal or anything like that. And because there's just absolutely nothing there at the moment, there's, like we've seen Israel destroying everything from like bakeries to like any kind of anywhere that can produce food. We've seen them restrict importing of like anything that is like anything resembling aid or food or anything like that. So they've been coming up with, like they've been having to eat and drink something. So they've been eating grass, polluted water, and other just like food scraps and anything that they could find left over or not destroyed by the Israeli forces. Um, so uh, so because these food supplies aren't getting through the water and aid is so sparse, there are a lot of reports of Palestinians being forced to use a mixture of rabbit, pigeon, and donkey feed in order to kind of fill out the flour, like mix it in with the flour to help it kind of go further, which is pretty wild, pretty extreme. And it's they don't think it's likely for any substantial aid to enter the besieged enclave until the US has finished building a port that is reportedly going to be used for aid, although some sources seem to think that it's the beginning of an extraction of wealth of gas reserves found near Gaza's coast. So it's pretty hard to say. There have been ships that have been left. A lot of governments and a lot of aid organizations have been trying to get permission to actually leave, to get boats full of aid to enter there, because they can't do it by air, they can't get through the Rafah crossing, they can't get through, on the ground. So the sea is the next option. And there has been a history of these aid flotillas going back years and years. Anyone from down here in Aotearoa might remember Marama Davidson was arrested on an aid flotilla years ago. So she's one of the co-leaders of our Greens party. And I would say Marama Davidson has been one of the people that actually kind of like does the thing instead of, just talking. So you might remember a few years back, she was detained by Israel, which was lucky because in the past, Israel has just like boarded those boats and just killed people, just like straight up, just, like not even in their own waters or anything like that, just gone in and just killed people. So, yeah, so that's really like horrific. So, yeah, they're trying to get the stuff through. So the US are supposedly building this port to enable access because all the other ports and everything have been destroyed. Whether it's actually to be used for that is still, kind of remains to be seen. What we're seeing is, like we are seeing a lot of people talking about this being the beginning of, these resource extraction kind of operations that have been talked about by America and by Israel for a while now, like even going back like years and years. There has been speculation about the value of like the gas reserves and everything underneath Gaza. So, like I think we have to try not to I think there is a conspiratorial thing to this where like people will be like, oh, this is it, it's all for, it's all for oil or whatever like that. But when you look at it, like, and what we have always kind of talked about on here is that there's a material, like there are material reasons for this, for everything that's happened to the people of Palestine outside of just, Israel functioning as basically like an army base in the Middle East. There are benefits to that land. There are resources there to be taken. Resources that the Palestinian people haven't had the ability to tap into because, they don't have the infrastructure because Israel stops them from, doing any of this stuff. So I think it's very, like, there haven't been any plans shown to extract these resources, but I think it is something that we should keep a very close eye on because I think it is very likely, and it's also just I think that's like the real reason why this is a big deal is that there's a lot of money to be made in the land there. There's a lot of aside from the the military strategic kind of element of having this, basically an American enclave in the Middle East. There's just, it's a rich land that has been deprived for so long. Um, so yeah, so we're gonna have to keep an eye on that one. Um, but yeah, it's aside from just the control of the people, control of the land. I think there's also a lot to be said about the way that Israel has kind of controlled the people, the oppressed people of Palestine. We've seen them being used as a disposable workforce and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, I think there's a lot of narratives that we get about it being like, and this is from more like the kind of like liberal news where they talk about it being like a religious war, or like about this like ideological battle of like the West versus like, the Orient or something like that, which Edward Said has obviously famously talked about. But yeah, I think we really need to look at these like the real material kind of benefits for America and Israel to be occupying this land and what they take from it. And I think that gives us a much better idea of their, their goals and their plans and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, so we'll keep an eye on that as we go. But yeah, massive support and solidarity to everyone in Palestine over there at the moment, fasting for Ramadan under these inhumane circumstances, and hopefully we'll see a free Palestine soon. So after that dark news, why don't you tell us a little bit about what's going on in Finland?
Yeah, we're starting to actually like tone up the news. I guess just after that story, we're talking about Finland's strikes that have closed down ports and railways. This is really exciting. On 11th of March, trade unions in Finland began a wave of strike action, which has closed all cargo handling in Finnish ports and also halted freight traffic on railways. The strike is currently intended to continue for 2 weeks. The strikes are in protest of the most serious attack on workers' rights and social security in the history of the Finnish welfare state, which have been launched by the right-wing government. The unions are fighting to defend the country's social model. With the support of the employers, the government is attacking the social security system and weakening job security. The government plans to start their massive reform package by restricting the right to strike in order to push through other cuts without the possibility of protest. ITF General Secretary Stephen Cotton said there is a worrying trend among some governments to try and shore up their power by silencing the rights of working people. The right to strike must be protected by every union across the globe, given it is the last resort of workers to exercise their democratic rights. And ITF President Paddy Crumlin said the ITF stands in solidarity with Finnish workers in their struggle against the current right-wing government. Unions saw off a similar attack in Argentina recently, and it is no less a threat when it comes to part of the world that prides itself on social democracy. Wherever the attacks on unions come from, the international trade union movement stands shoulder to shoulder in defiance. So yeah, interesting, like resistance there in exactly the same way as that ITF spokesperson Paddy Crumlin said, in Argentina recently there was the general strikes to try and prevent Javier Milei's reforms of workers' rights in that country. And this is it. Direct action gets the goods. It always does. But we've also got some other good news about Aotearoa schools. So tell us about that.
Yeah, cool. It is. It's all good from here on out. Well, so down here in Aotearoa, we've got the climate school strike coming up on April 5th. So there's like the climate school strike is kind of like a thing that's been going on for a while down here, where a bunch of young kids all get together and they, instead of going to school, they go and protest in town. And it's actually been a huge thing over the years. A lot of young activists, like their first kind of exposure to this, to like to any kind of, I guess, like radical action or even like left thought, is by going along to things like this. So yeah, so there's been a bunch of them over the years, and they're always good. It's it's a bunch of kids that they they're in school, they maybe are just starting to kind of like get out into the world and see things, and then be like, wait, like there are a lot of terrible things that the government is doing. There's a lot of all that kind of stuff, whatever. And so even though it's school strike for climate, it's usually quite like it's like a very encompassing kind of leftist kind of thing. And it's always great to see. It's always good to see all the kids getting out there and doing stuff. So yeah, there was a statement put out by one particular group, School Strike for Climate Ototahi. So Ototahi is like that's the actual Maori name for Christchurch, so the big city down in our southern island. So yeah, so they say, where is it? School Strike for Climate Ototahi is holding our biggest strike yet to bring about action on intersectional climate and social justice issues in Aotearoa. Students and adults alike will unite and take to the streets on April the 5th as the current government proposes climate butchering policies like the repeal of the ban on offshore oil and gas drilling, as well as a possible treaty referendum, and in the wake of racist policies such as the recent abolishment of Tiaka Whaiora. This is an especially important time to make our voices heard. We plan to see the biggest strike mobilization to date. So that's cool because there are a lot of the times we'll see, I guess, kind of like more like liberal minded climate strikes where they're just like, we want the government to, agree to not do this, or to, like give some money to climate initiatives or whatever. But this is a pretty kind of, pretty expansive kind of thing. So yeah, on this day, several other protests will be held across the country in Poneke, Tamaki Makaurau, Otepoti, Kirikiriroa, and more. So that's so Wellington, Auckland, Dunedin, Hamilton, and more. So yeah, previous strikes have mobilized over 38,000 people combined. This strike aims to drive council government action on climate and social justice issues. Their central demands are for the Christchurch City Council and national government to count international transport emissions, keep the oil and gas exploration ban. So that's one thing that the current coalition government is trying to repeal. We have a ban on new oil and gas exploration. So at the moment, companies can only use existing kind of like oil and gas reserves that have been already tapped into and are already being used. So a while back we got a ban which would stop them from further drilling, all that kind of stuff, because even like a lot of the areas that they want to drill in out in the ocean are the homes of like endangered species like Maui's dolphin. So yeah, so they at the moment, NZ First, particularly, it's kind of been Shane Jones's pet project. He's trying to repeal that to he says he's going to supercharge mining and extractive industries in New Zealand, which is obviously terrible for the climate and terrible for our kind of even just like local environment. So also the other aims for this protest are to honor the treaty. There's been a lot of attacks on our Treaty of Waitangi, which has been it's been probably the biggest, I guess, like lightning rod radicalization for a lot of Maori at the moment, is seeing the way that the government is has come out under urgency, kind of pushing through bills that undermine a lot of gains that Maori activists and politicians have made over the years, completely undermining it, and what a lot of people are saying is undemocratic. So in an undemocratic way, where they are pushing bills through under urgency that should be, they should be read in the House, they should be voted on, they should be like, the public should have an opportunity to have input on these, but they're not being given. So this this protest, as well as being climate, based they want to address that as well, because a lot of these, there's like a lot of climate initiatives, a lot of things that are like environmentally focused in New Zealand do. Like there's a huge overlap between Maori activism and climate activism. It's like, they're kind of ingrained. And also, they also ask for the government to withdraw New Zealand forces in Yemen and expel the Israeli ambassador. So as far as we know, we don't have any New Zealand forces in Palestine, but we do in Yemen. So they also want to, withdraw them and expel the Israeli ambassador, Ran Jacobi, I think his name is, who our coalition leaders have been seen cozying up to, even amidst like some of the most horrific strikes. We've seen photos from the same days where Winston Peters is cozying up with the ambassador and smiling and drinking tea and all this kind of stuff. So like the fact that you could even do that on a day where they're killing children in record numbers is it's so far beyond the pale. And the last little demand that these organizers have is to keep the ban on live exports. So this is something that another recent ban that New Zealand made was the ban on live export domesticated animals, so farm animals, things like that, like cows, sheep, all that kind of stuff. So we had a ban on live exports because it basically means these animals go into a boat for a long time, get shipped off all around the world in pretty horrific conditions that like you don't have to be like militant vegan to look at this and be like, this is fucked up, And so that was banned for a long time, especially after there was like a lot of really horrific instances of this. Like there was our former Prime Minister, John Key, sweetened a deal with a bunch of like Saudi kind of, billionaire types by sending over a gigantic shipment of New Zealand sheep and lambs. And it was like, I don't even know if any of them survived the trip. It was like pretty gnarly. So after that, when it was brought to the public's attention, a lot of progressive MPs really kind of pushed to get that completely banned, rightfully so. And so they're looking at repealing that again because that's seen as like a good New Zealand export. So those are the demands for the climate strike, which is obviously, as we've seen, more than just a climate strike. But so through the strike, the school strike for climate organizers hope to remind young people that even though they aren't able to vote, there are other ways for them to get their voices out and be involved in the democratic process. And I think that's really important because actions like this show young kids that they can be out there on the picket line, they can be out there actually kind of like getting amongst it. And it's not just like like a lot of kids are kind of like, oh well, I can't vote, and when I can vote, that's my way of affecting political change, which is absolutely not. It's one of the less effective ways of affecting political change in in your country, in your democracy. So this is a really good entry point for a lot of people. And even like as an entry point, it has like it does have a history of being quite effective. So more power to all of the school strike for climate organizers. And we'll see April 5th. It's still a couple of weeks away. I think 3 weeks away. So I guess we'll check back in with them a little bit later on and see how we're going. But so that is all of the like the current news. I just wanted to remind everyone that Red Planet is made possible by the direct support of all of you out there. If you'd like to support us, head on over to our Patreon, and you can check out, there's a couple different tiers for all different kinds of whatever you can afford. Check it out, see what you can do. There's a couple cool, there's little rewards and bonuses for different tiers. We'll get back to that at the end of the stream. But for now, so the main the main theme of this episode we want to get into is leftist wins. Yeah, I wasn't here last week for stream with Benny, but from what I've heard from everyone else, there was a lot of talk about like just celebrating the wins, the positive little things that have happened. So yeah, so me and Mule are going to go through. We're going to talk about some things that have been happening that are causes for celebration.
Hell yeah. Do you want me to do this first one? Been talking for a while. Have a little rest.
All right.
Sip of your coffee, dude. So this one rocks actually. There's
It's so
another.
good. I actually think it's so good, and like
Well,
yeah.
this is why I steamrolled you to get to it because I wanted to read this one. So I'm sorry if I've stolen this off you, but listen. New law in Brazil officially vetoes the use of hostile architecture. Like, okay, so hostile architecture, what's that? It's the stuff that you see all around your home city, wherever it is that you live, that you're like, why is that there? Why are those spikes underneath this bypass? That doesn't make any sense. Why is that part of the park inaccessible at night? Well, that is an example of hostile architecture. But in Brazil, to commemorate the anniversary of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, Brazil's federal government this week unveiled measures to implement the national policy for the homeless, which are part of the Visible Streets Plan. In addition to the allocation of funds and the launch of the National Human Rights Observatory, set up in September, lawmakers have approved the regulation of Father Julio Lancelotti Law. The name of the law is a reference to churchman Julio Lancelotti, who has been promoting social work aimed chiefly at homeless people in Sao Paulo city since 1986. Coordinator of the homeless people's pastoral, Father Lancelotti went viral when he used a sledgehammer to remove sharp stones that have been installed by city authorities on a viaduct to prevent the place being used as a shelter. The priest expressed his gratitude for the regulation of the law that bears his name and called for the effective implementation of the initiatives in the plan launched on Monday. A sledgehammer on all hostile architecture. May all hostile architecture be removed and never used again. We must take special care of mental health, the suffering of the homeless. It's a specific, urgent issue, just as it is urgent to have somewhere to live, to have the dignity to live with autonomy, balance, and the necessary affection, he said.
That's such a base statement. Like what he said there is like so good. A sledgehammer on all hostile architecture. It's like, like this is like, I think like this is so cool. Like every now and then, you see that there are these people, even, within these religious organizations that, we all know can be pretty shit a lot of the time, to see someone like this who like he really believes it, like he's really like he's one of the guys that gets it, and he really has this like deep compassion, and it's driven him to direct action. He's not just like, oh, woe is me, like, like
No, that motherfucker got a sledgehammer. He got a fucking sledgehammer and smashed up some spikes.
yeah. And yeah, and I think it's like, yeah, it's pretty amazing. It's like it's interesting to see as well that it's like so like this was Lula's government that have like brought forth this this new regulation, and it was here Bolsonaro that brought in the hostile architecture stuff. Well, that helped push it like to the point that it's been at. So it's like it is great to see that this is the swing, like this is the back, like it's like directly addressing these things. Like he says that it is it's an urgent issue. A lot of people think of like, oh, there's all these other things we have to deal with, and we'll get to homeless people later, like when we fix all the other problems for society or whatever. When it's like, no, this is something that should be important. This is something that should be on the table immediately. And yeah, for him to take direct action like that, I think is really inspiring. And I hope that it really resonates, not just with like leftists around the world, but then other people of faith, regardless of what denomination or whatever like that, and they see a person like that, and it's like, it's almost like something out of like a story from the Bible, right? It is
Right,
like,
it is biblical actually. Yeah.
so yeah, amazing to see. And he's an old guy, he's not like, he's not like this charming young like guy. Well, I'm sure he's pretty charming, but like he's not like the Catholic priest on Fleabag or whatever. He's like he's an old guy. um, so yeah, awesome to see him getting out there. And so yeah, the next one is we've got about 600 workers unionizing at Microsoft-owned Activision, which we previously mentioned. Activision with Blizzard Activision, Bobby Kotick, to shine a light on how bad that corporation can be. About 600 workers at Activision Publishing, the video game maker owned by Microsoft, are unionizing, forming the largest ever video games workers union in the United States. The Communications Workers of America said on Friday. So Microsoft recognized the union after the vote count was finalized. So that's good, because sometimes they'll do a vote, they'll count everything, and the company will actually just be like, no. But there have been a lot of smaller things building up to this that have actually kind of forced well, I guess kind of like the FTC has been watching them pretty closely after they had the big merger, and there's been a couple other little kind of smaller scale things. So it's kind of like they really have to, like, they had to recognize them when the vote came through. Otherwise, it was going to be their heat would have turned up a little bit on them. So yeah, so these employees in particular work in quality assurance, and 390 of them voted to form a union, while 8 opposed the effort, the union said, and about 200 workers did not vote. So that is, that's a clear victory. 394, 200 abstained, and only 8 opposed the effort. So that's, basically 390 versus 8. 200
Those
get it
eight,
down.
I'm not gonna lie, but I think they probably need to be like looked at for other potential reactionary ideas.
I feel like that would be there's like the guy in the office that like that is sucking up to the manager because he's like,
Oh hell
I'm
yeah.
gonna be the CEO one day. I'm gonna work my way up,
It's
because
totally those guys, yeah.
yeah. And there was, like, they did train the managers not to make any comment for or against the unions, and they were like, you can't say anything, because they knew that, they were going to be under a lot of scrutiny and stuff. So yeah, there's always that kind of, like the anti-union, the company man kind of dude that is gonna kind of pick up that banner for the managers.
There was literally a meme about this the other day. It was taken from a comic somewhere. But it was like a guy saying like something about like, oh, production's up 90% and this is really good, and if only those other slackers would pick up the whatever, then we'd be one of the top companies and whatever. And his coworker is like, yeah, okay, Jim, we get it. If corporate capitalism had a dick, you'd be first in line to suck it. That's just exactly what these people are saying.
Yeah, totally. Well, so yeah, so these were all quality assurance workers. So in quality assurance, the workers test games looking for bugs and other issues, flagging them for the other developers to fix. So since the majority of QA jobs are typically entry level, the industry has a reputation for devaluing these roles, emphasizing the need for labor protections. This is like totally true. I know plenty of people that have worked in QA as kind of like, that's their like entry into the games industry, and they've gone on to do other stuff. But a lot of the times QA is seen as like a disposable workforce, which is like, if you actually talk to anyone that really is like a game dev that is actually about it and is really loves making games, making good games, they'll tell you that QA is necessary, because otherwise you launch a game and there's a million bugs in there, and you're going, people are like bombarding your Steam reviews saying like, I can't load it up, I can't do this, like this breaks or whatever. And like, it's QA that they play the game on like a bunch of different systems, like, different graphics cards, whatever, different operating systems, just to make sure that it's going to work, any little conflicts, any little bugs and stuff, and iron out those things. And I think it's like a lot of the time the managers, or like, like the people higher up will dislike QA because they're like, every time you come to us, you're telling us that we need to spend more money paying these devs to iron out these bugs. So it's like QA is like the annoying people that come in and tell us it's going to take us weeks more to do this. They're, like, they're all entry level, so we can just get rid of them if they're annoying or whatever. But they don't understand that that's what makes for a smooth launch, and just like an all-around better product in the end, a much better customer experience.
What's kind of funny about this being mentioned is because when ZeniMax Online was mentioned, my neurons started going like bzz, bzz, and like connecting, and I was like, oh yeah, no, I was sort of coerced into becoming an unpaid QA for Elder Scrolls Online. They were like, you they were like, you can have this really cool early access to Elder Scrolls Online, and all you have to do is just report all the bugs when you see them. And I remember like the first time I loaded it up, I think you start. I don't know if it's like different races start in different bits, but like when you first start, like you start in like a cave, and you just could see outside of all of the walls, and I was like, this is dog shit. I'm not even having fun. Why am I doing this? I'm doing this for free. This is like, I should be getting paid to do this. And I just stopped doing it after like, I think I played it for like a day and a bit, and like the first day was just basically spent like waiting for the thing that I reported to be fixed, and then playing a bit more, and then same thing fucking happened. Yeah, absolutely. It's one of the toughest fucking things to do. It's so shit.
They preyed upon, they'll prey upon people that are like, because there's a lot of Elder Scrolls fans that are like, I will do this because of my love for the realm of Tamriel.
That's how I applied to the thing. That's literally what I said. I was like, I've been playing Elder Scrolls since I was 5.
Yeah. So yeah, and then in the same way, like a lot of QA people that get in and have like a really shitty time, because they're really passionate and they want to be game devs, they want to work in another department, and it's like a lot of people, like I know people that have worked in games for a long time, and they have always talked about how it's a dream industry, right? So people will take a lot of shit to work on the dream, and unfortunately, a lot of the time, it's not your dream that you're working on. It's someone else's dream, but you got to make the sacrifices, and you have the shitty work conditions and all that kind of stuff. So yeah, this has been organizing wise a huge blessing, said Kara Fanon, a member of the union organizing committee who works for Activision near Minneapolis. It has helped with a lot of people who are concerned about union busting or potential retaliation. So that's like another thing, right? Yeah, retaliation is a huge reason for people either not voting or voting against unionization. But yeah, last year, Microsoft voluntarily recognized a union of 300 QA workers at ZeniMax Online, which is what where Muel was temporarily doing free QA for. It joined the union at Blizzard Albany and Raven Software. Video game labor unions are picking up steam, but have faced difficulties in light of the rampant layoffs. In 2023, the CWA filed an unfair labor complaint against Sega, claiming the company was planning to phase out temporary employees who were part of the company's Aegis union that formed last year. When Sega eventually did lay off employees, Aegis said union negotiations were able to save a number of jobs. So that's huge, right? At the moment, like we've been seeing for the last little while, just huge amounts of layoffs, like thousands and thousands of people across the kind of video game industry. And I mean, it's like it's coming up on the end of the financial year, right? So they want to like just trim the fat as much as possible so that it looks like they're making 0.5% more so that their investors can, go home happy or whatever, which is just not how it's not how good video games are made. There's all this stuff on the, like, there's a bit of a thing going on at the moment with it's like almost like Gamergate 2, where all these people are rampaging across the internet against like like all these games are so terrible because they're spending all this money on like consultancy for like woke initiatives or whatever like that, yeah, DEI and all that kind of stuff, where it's like, no, like that, the funding that goes towards consultancy is minuscule. What is really killing video games is stuff like this increased kind of like corporatization of what, for when it began, was really like a kind of hobby industry for a lot of people. And there is like a middle ground there, right? But yeah, so instead of, like, they're seeing the fallout, they're seeing the shitty games coming out and that are all buggy and completely fucked, and they're looking at that and they're being like, instead of looking at what's happening behind the scenes with like happening with the unions and like all the layoffs and just like the actual kind of labor issues behind it, they're instead saying like, this is because of the woke. It's like, this is such a like a two-dimensional analysis, like it's so easy to see what's going on here.
It's just really funny that like Boogie 2988, I don't know if anyone remembers that guy.
Boogie 1488, you mean?
1488,
Yeah.
like literally saying, what was the tweet he said? Oh, I can't enjoy any video games nowadays because they all just lecture you about how it's bad to be white. And it's like, there's literally no video games that do that. Like, where you've made that up, it's so absurd. Yeah, so yeah, you can see right through it.
Yeah, it's so wild. It's just like, there are like a lot of those creators, like if you really want to see good video games made by people that enjoy what they're making, like this would be how you could do that. Like imagine some of these creators if they were just like, yeah, like check out what these unions are doing, check out how they're saving people's jobs, but instead they're just like, go woke, go broke. It's like, you just have like even like children have a better level of understanding of
Yeah.
like this kind of stuff than a lot of these content creators do. So yeah, and just as a little side note, as the US tech industry largely developed in the aftermath of successful attempts to break union power and has been allowed to grow with a near lack of regulation, tech companies have only just started to be unsuccessful in preventing union organizing among their workforces. So yeah, this is definitely going to be a conversation that we're going to probably keep coming back to in Red Planet, because even with these recent layoffs, there's there's still, I would say, like in general there has been a lot of momentum building up with the labor movement in the world, but I think in particular in the games industry there's a lot of people looking at this and saying, like, looking at what happened with Sega and being like, oh wow, so their union Aegis actually managed to negotiate to save a bunch of jobs. Like, damn, I wish we had that when we were at wherever. So yeah, I feel like we're going to keep seeing that one pop up again, and I hope to see a much more unionized industry in general, just like a lot of the entertainment industries. I think there's a lot of good that unions can do in particularly those industries at this moment in time, but in general, in most industries, in all industries. So yeah, so that's pretty good. Biggest games union so far in the States. But what else is happening? What's happening? What has happened over in the States with these two big organizations?
Yeah, this is quite an interesting one. So the National Center for Transgender Equality, Transgender Legal Defense and Education Fund announced intent to merge to form Advocates for Trans Equality. So the National Center for Transgender Equality, or NCTE, a group that focuses primarily on federal policy reform, and the Transgender Legal Defense and Education Fund, or TLDEF, which works to advance trans rights through litigation, will merge by this summer to become Advocates for Trans Equality, or A4TE. With double the resources, expertise, and fearless commitment to justice, we will be a powerful national organization to lead the next chapter of the transgender rights movement, said Executive Director Andy Mara. Advocates for trans equality will show exactly what can be materially achieved when trans advocates come together and seek nothing less than equality for trans people in America. By combining strengths into a single entity, advocates for trans equality will be a highly influential and effective voice, ensuring that trans experiences and perspectives guide the national movement for trans rights. Advocates for trans equality will house both a 501c3 organization that focuses on litigation and public education and a 501c4 that will influence policy to fight for transgender equality at a local, state, and federal level. Now more than ever, we need trans voices and organizations leading on the issues that impact the trans community, said Shelby Chestnut, the executive director of Transgender Law Center. In the face of discrimination and justice, the trans community needs the strength that this historic merger will create. It is an essential step to achieving equality for all. This moment represents the future of the LGBTQIA+ movement's work, with powerful trans leaders at the forefront. Advocates for trans equality will maintain, strengthen, and expand upon the life-saving policy and legal programs for which each organization is known. It will operate offices in both New York City and Washington, D.C., with staff working across the country. The merger is expected to be final by summer 2024, subject to regulatory approvals and satisfaction of all closing conditions under the definitive agreement. Now, this is like a very interesting development, because these two organizations have obviously got similar goals, but like different ways of doing them. But I think fundamentally, just having like this massive company that has got like a lot more power behind it, a lot more I guess bargaining power in terms of being taken seriously is quite the improvement. And I think that there's so much coming out of anti-trans policies in the USA now, and people, Republicans using trans people as an election campaign initiative, that like there are some people who are on the right who are just getting like sick and tired of it, because there's just like there is simply not enough trans people for any of the things that they're saying to like be even remotely true, even if they were true, to be even remotely damaging to anyone, right? Like this is like the fundamental thing that falls down with all of the arguments about trans people in the US. Like, there's trans people competing in sports, and it's not the gender that they were assigned at birth, and so it's this, that, and the other. And it's like, of all the situations where that was like seen to be happening, which wasn't, it wasn't actually affecting it anyway. I think there were like two trans kids participating in a sport that was in the category of their identity now, rather than like what they were assigned at birth. And it was just such a small thing. I mean, of course it's become like the big talking point and the big reactionary culture war thing. But what comes out of it is stuff like this, and there will always be resistance, and there will just always be people who are ready to stand up for their trans siblings and fight,
And it's and like, I mean, there's a lot of different battlefields, right? There's like the kind of more like activist led direct action, but there's also like there is this hugely complicated, expensive, and just like, for a lot of people, completely inaccessible like legal realm where a lot of this stuff is happening. And like you see in a lot of places, things get passed through kind of under the radar. Things don't get challenged, things don't get really kind of scrutinized in the way that they should. Whereas like groups like this, and there's like a couple people that are, I'd say, like legal activists, work really tirelessly to actually keep tabs on all this stuff and actually challenge it in ways that they can, in ways that would be really really inaccessible to people outside of the legal field that like don't actually know how a lot of this kind of stuff works. So like it is really great that to have a gigantic and trans-led organization on the inside there that can work directly with people on the outside. And there's a lot of stuff here that they do aside from like challenging legislation, but from to actually helping out trans individuals that have been the target of this kind of legislation and stuff. So yeah, so really really cool to see all of that happening. But yeah, so coming next we have, this is a kind of a kind of bigger overarching one, but 2023 was kind of the year of the strike.
Oh
So
yeah.
there were so many strikes happening all over the world last year, but coming up soon, this is in a lot of places tied with the new financial year. We're starting to see people beginning to get the new contracts that they won through the actual all the strikes, all the the collective action from the past year. So all these people, workers are beginning to see the wins from the swell of those strikes, as pay rises and other benefits upload a broader population of job holders than we've seen in decades. So labor activism fueled by post pandemic resentment boiled over in 2023, with more than 500,000 people walking off the job, according to Bloomberg Law's database of work stoppages. The US Department of Labor recorded 4.5 million lost workdays in October due to strikes, the highest in 40 years, which is like, that's huge. But when you think about it, 4.5 million lost work days, that's like such a huge blow to capital, right? Like, um, so the beneficiaries of these new collective bargaining agreements are also increasingly diverse. Women and people of color are unionizing at higher rates than white men, comprising nearly 2/3 of union represented workers, a Bloomberg Law analysis of federal data found. That means earnings from the contracts will be distributed across a wider section of the workforce, even as overall union membership continues to atrophy. The 2023 strike wave is representative of the country, said Gregory Floyd, president of Teamsters Local 237 in New York. There are a lot of first generation union members who didn't really understand what being in the union is, said Floyd. They landed in these union jobs but didn't really know what it means. This is their introduction. Workers like these are increasingly the face of the US labor movement. Black and Latino workers made up 31% of union represented workers in 2022, compared to a quarter in 2002, and stand to make big gains from the new deals. It's sort of a renaissance, Floyd said. Now everyone is paying attention. 3 months after reaching tentative agreements with Ford Motor Co., General Motors Co., and Stellantis NV, nearly half of the United Auto Workers Union's 25% pay rise has kicked in on top of a $5,000 ratification bonus. Over the next 4 years, base pay will increase to more than $40 an hour. The companies also significantly upped the amount they're contributing to retirement investment funds, but didn't bring back defined benefit pensions like the union wanted. So they didn't get the pensions, but there's still like, you think about it, a 25% pay rise on top of a $5,000 ratification bonus. So over the next 4 years, that's like wild. Base pay $40 an hour, like that's huge. And so it's like that's what they were able to get from striking. Like it's incredible. So after the longest strike in Hollywood history, 118 days that ground film production and shows to a halt, TV and film actors have been receiving their 7% raise since November 9th. The deal also included $40 million for actors in streaming service shows to recover lost pay from reruns they would otherwise get on network television, which is huge, right? Like normally, back on TV, you would get reruns where actors would get a little bit of a kind of, they'd get a little bit of a royalty that would come through when another channel picked up old episodes of like, Seinfeld or whatever like that. But for streaming, no one ever really was able to negotiate how that works. And so now they have. So it means that like, and this isn't just like big actors. Like this isn't just like Tom Cruise and stuff. The majority of the actors on strike and the SAG-AFTRA whatever union are just extras, like background actors, small time actors, people doing things that you might not ever see, but they're actors, like that's their primary source of income, and yeah, and they should be paid for that. So yeah, the biggest thing that workers achieved this year is an understanding that they can successfully increase their expectations, says Stuart Applebaum, president of the Retail, Wholesale, and Department Store Union. And I see that everywhere, he says, which is like great when you think about that too, for the workers understanding that they can increase their expectations, to have that imagination to be like, this isn't just like, this isn't as good as it gets. Like, I'm not just going to sit in this job and work all day or whatever and just not get anything for it. Like, I can look at these examples of other unions, other workers, people doing jobs just like me, and what they were able to achieve by stepping off, which is like, it's amazing. And I think that that strike wave is going to continue to grow. I would love to see another year like 2023 and for the labor movement. There's just like there's so much to be gained when we look at, like this story talked about the post-pandemic resentment. When we look at like well, I would say it's not really post-pandemic, right? Like it's still happening, but that was the wording from the article. But yeah. So like when we look at the amazing like profits that have been made for other people, right? And then it's like, as workers, we can go like, look, the money is there, the profits are there, they're milking us for all this. Like, we can get a bigger piece of that pie. And I think that's what Stuart Applebaum was talking about here. How he sees it everywhere. It's like people looking across lines at different industries and being like, damn, like, the auto workers, they've successfully kind of unionized a big chunk of their industry, and they've done this. And looking at their own industry, like, like we're seeing with like the games industry and that other story that we had, with people being like, we could do that here. Like, we could get together and we could kind of and we can work for a better deal for us and for the other people in our industry that might not even know that they could get it yet. So yeah, I think that's pretty amazing. Some great news looking over that and all the wins, because it's, like we do the news every week, but sometimes it's good to just kind of like look back over everything and be like, oh, even though a lot of bad stuff has been happening, there have been these wins. We have been kind of chalking up a few for the left here and there.
Well, it does have to be said, we did kind of start by just talking about wins, and we kind of got into this rut of reporting where we're actually just like, I'm reporting on like Diane Abbott being said that like someone said that he wants to shoot her, and it's like yeah, no, this kind of does happen, and I think yeah, we do need to like try our best to like figure out how we can get more exposure on people who've done these wins. And we also have to remember that there's been a lot of wins considering Palestine as well. We've had companies decide to completely cut ties with weapons manufacturers like Elbit Systems due to the like solid work of Palestine Action. Even not in Palestine Action, in some cases, like in Japan, there was that one company that was just like, yeah, we're not doing this anymore, man. I don't know much about the protest situation in Japan, but like from what I've seen, it's been fairly tame. Just like most places, really. So not a lot of direct action going on there, and that was pretty much enough to be like, yeah, we're not dealing with these cunts anymore.
I really liked when in the article, well, the story that you read out about Finland, I really liked how the union organizers there were really clear, saying like this is a left-wing issue and we are fighting against a right-wing government. Like they were really clear on that they were like, it's like, it's easy to I think there's like a lot of places that will kind of tiptoe around explicitly saying like this is, we are left wing, this is left wing. Like I see that a lot with a lot of more, I guess, more like conservative unions, and you get that with a lot with some of the bigger unions in New Zealand. There are some of them that will like there are definitely some that like we have some of the bigger unions showing up at like the Palestine rallies and stuff like that, which is awesome to see. But you do get some of the bigger ones that just kind of like they kind of make out like they're like it's like nonpartisan or just like we're just here for the workers, and it's like, well, if you're here for the workers, this is the left.
That's left wing. That's a left wing thing. Yeah.
So to say, to see these big unions say this is from like we are a left wing organization, this is a left wing fight, and we are fighting the right wing here, to be like really clear about that and to actually to say that in their like official messaging and stuff, I think is really important. And I think it kind of touches on what in this last thing that I read out, there was a quote from a guy that was saying, where was it? Yeah, this guy Gregory Floyd, who is the president of the Teamsters Local 237 in New York. He says, what did he say? There are a lot of first generation union members who didn't really understand what being in the union is. They landed in these union jobs but didn't really know what it means. This is the introduction, like the idea that because people could just take a job in a unionized workplace and just like not really know that is like they don't really know what the labor movement is in general and how that is, how that is the left. A lot of people think these days like the left is just like gay and brown stuff or whatever,
the
it's
woke.
like,
It's the
yeah,
woke.
yeah. It's like it's DEI, it's Sweet Baby Incorporated. That's the left. So they don't understand that there is like the real underlying thing is, this kind of like working class emancipation. And so it's cool to see that, and I hope that a lot more of these bigger unions are explicitly like saying like this is a left wing thing and this is what the left is about. It's been great seeing like a lot of like the Starbucks organizers and stuff, like they're all very like left wing and very openly like saying like, like people that are in these organizing positions being like, we are communists, or like I am an anarchist, or things like that, where it's like legitimately kind of tying these things together to show people that it's like, like this is the left is the working class labor movement. So yeah, so it's great to see that kind of stuff happening, and see it happening in in the newspapers and on the TV and all that kind of stuff as well. Yeah, even though like union membership is kind of like all over the place in bigger picture, but the actual union activity is way up, so that's really good to see.
And
um
another interesting thing that we're going to see is, as a result of people being radicalized from going on a march every week for Palestine and not having any sort of like tangible results come of that, especially in electoral politics, people getting radicalized of that will be going, well, hang on a minute, who are these people that are marching with us? Yeah, okay, we got this union over here. Oh, okay. Oh, this is a tenants union. Oh, we've got like an anti-fascist organization here. Oh, okay. And people will start to associate more with people like that and be like, oh, actually, like these guys they're not that bad. They're not just all about being woke. They're about worker power. They're about freeing Palestine. They're about, things that actually matter in terms of like, well, I mean, I don't want to, I don't want to sound like the things that people accuse people of being woke for don't matter, because of course they do, but you know what I mean, like they're gonna be seeing like, oh, okay, this stuff matters, to me, kind of thing. And
yeah, or like see where the intersection is there, right? Like see what the connection is. And I think that's the same with down here, where we're seeing people turn out to their first protests ever for like in support of Palestine, and then they're seeing like a lot of like Maori activist groups there, like people waving like the Tino Rangitirotanga flag, things like that, and just being like, oh, like what's the connection there? Why, like what is that? And then also, yeah, like seeing like the unions that show up, and there have been a couple where, they give speeches, obviously, and there's like a lot of like, like Palestinian people that live in New Zealand that have given speeches and stuff, and then there'll be like, you know, like local Maori activists, local, like we've had Greens MPs, Maori Party MPs, and also like you know, like union organizers getting up and talking. There's like one guy who it's like a union organizer over here who's like an Irish guy, and he kind of like at one of them he made the link between, you know, like the history of like Irish oppression, like Maori oppression, and then also, you know, like Palestinian oppression and things like that, where it's like gets people thinking and being like, oh wow, like so this isn't just like a one-off thing, like this is like, you know, this is a bigger thing, and you know, there's like the idea of like the one struggle. And yeah, it was like an Irish guy leading the globalize the intifada chant, which I think is like, you know, a really you know, like a really important demonstration of solidarity. So yeah, I think that there's going through this year, we're going to see a lot more of that. I would love to see a lot more of that.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a kind of a unique episode. It's just me and Tim. It's lads' night, and we've been talking about wins. We've been talking about news, and I know that you think your cool older brothers probably aren't going to give you any homework because you know we're chilling out. It's lads' night. Well, no, that's not true. I've got some homework for you. Go and find some good news. You can go out there and you can find it. Like you just have to, you know, look for it, and you know, follow the right accounts either on Twitter or on YouTube or even TikTok if you've still got access to that, for as long as you've got access to that for. So yeah, go ahead and shoot out there and get that done.
Find some good news, and if you can't find any, then make some.
Yes, that would be more based.
Do something so sick that we have to report on it on Red Planet.
We're forced to report on it. It's just too based.
Exactly. That's your that's the advanced sicko mode level sicko mode level homework if you really want to impress us. But yeah, thanks for coming along, everyone. So we would like to remind everyone that obviously we can do what we do and dedicate this amount of time to it because of the support of our patrons over at Patreon. So there's sorry, I totally just like lost my thing going on.
Is that because you were Googling? Is that because you were getting the Red Planet Patreon up? So
I was trying to type in patreon.com/red_planet at the same time that I was trying to say go to patreon.com/red_planet, but I was at different phases of typing it than I was at saying it. So that's that's where we're at right now, everyone.
That's just because you're too based, Tim. You're just too based. You're doing two things at once. I'm proud of you.
Yeah. Well, we got there in the end. So patreon.com/red_planet. And so yeah, so bookmark that. So we've got a bunch of different levels of support that you can give us, you know, all tailored to different kind of, you know, amounts that you can give. The first one we've got is Sprite mode. So that's about $2 American a month. It's $3.50 New Zealand a month. And I'm guessing it's like, what is it, like just under £2 a month? Is that right?
It's actually £2.
Bang on. So get started with your support for Red Planet by becoming a Sprite. Benefits include the sacred and forbidden knowledge that you are helping the Red Planet team, early access to VODs, and access to the Red Planet Discord. And Muel, what's next? What's up from Sprite?
Whoa, Tim, we've got it's 13 New Zealand dollars 50, yeah, and it's £8.
$17.50.
Oh, it's 17 New Zealand dollars. I swear that changes every fucking week. It probably doesn't.
It does. It does.
17 in New Zealand dollars and £8.50 over here in the UK, and it's $10 if you're in America. Everybody loves a goblin. We all get a little goblin mode from time to time. Complete your gobology by going goblin mode with everything from Sprite Mode, a pack of cool Red Planet stickers for you to stick in legal places and only in places like that, and access to exclusive Red Planet Discord hangouts, which me and Tim should complete our hangout that we forgot to complete. That we started like at the end of last year when we were watching Zeitgeist. So maybe we'll get that organized soon, and you can join us in the Discord for the Discord hangout.
I'm actually
if you're
really
a Goblin
keen
moder.
for we should do some kind of game stream sometime soon. Like I feel like maybe some kind of like, I don't know, something that we can play with people that are hanging out, you know, like, I don't know, just kind of Jackbox or
Fall Guys or whatever it is.
Something like that. Yeah. Something where it's just like a mass multiplayer thing would be great. But so after Goblin mode, we then have Beast mode. So in New Zealand dollars, that's $34.50 a month. I'm gonna say like 20 US.
It's 10. It's 20 US. Yeah.
20 US. Yeah. And so how many pounds is that?
It's 17 pounds.
17 pounds. All right. Cool. So, holy shit, are you actually going to go beast mode? Well, then we can offer you all the stuff from the lower tiers and pin badges. Yep, pin badges. We are excellent new Red Planet pin badge. Literally everywhere is completely cool and good to do. So that gets you everything so far. But what if you want to go a little bit harder? What if a little bit sicker? Mule, what is the final tier?
The final tier is sicko mode. Oh, whoa. It's £85 a month or $100 a month in the USA. And what is it?
172 a month.
172
New Zealand dollars.
New Zealand dollars. That's crazy. That's a crazy amount of money. But if you are crazy for Red Planet, then it's the right amount to spend. That's right. If you support us this much, we can only reasonably offer you all the stuff from the lower tiers, plus a very special thank you message at the end of every stream. And that looks like this. Thank you, JBP, Queen Pib, Cassie Tastrophe, and Risk Inverse for being our sickos. We couldn't do this without you. We genuinely couldn't. The show would have to stop. I don't know how we started it without you. But since we've shouted out the Patreon and thanked the sickos, Tim, I want to know, where can I find more Tim? I want to know. I want to know what you're doing. I want to know what you're doing all the time.
So you can find me by looking up. If you're on Twitch or YouTube, you can find me as Conquest of Dread. If you are on Twitter or Blue Sky, you can find me as Dread Conquest. Or if you're interested in like tabletop games, like, you know, like role-playing games and stuff like that, I have a little project I've been working on now for a while called Dark RPG. If you jump over on Twitter, Dark RPG 2000, you can see a little bit more about that. And what about Mule? Where can we find more about Mule?
Me, Tim, well, I've got a link tree and it's called linktree.ee/DJ Muel, which is DJ MUEL. You can find all my links there, pretty much everything. My YouTube channel where I do my main stuff, my VOD channel where you can watch past streams of mine. Recently, I had like a stream where I reacted to Joe Rogan and Brett Weinstein talking about how AIDS was caused by poppers that popped off for no reason whatsoever.
That's wild.
That was I know, and like it just for some reason just got like 1,500 views out of nowhere, and there were just so many Joe Rogan fans in the comments getting super mad. You can find me there, linktree.ee/DJ Mule. Check me out on Patreon there. I got a load of exclusive Patreon stuff on there. I just released an exclusive stream where I was talking about my recent video, AI, the political connection, which has a different name on YouTube. It's called What Can We Do About AI on there. It's kind of like a director's commentary track of how I made the video. Well, it's for about half of it because I've not finished it. There's going to be another one later on. So that's that. Loads of stuff that you can find out about me there. But we have a missing guest this week, and it would be remiss of us to not mention Kira. And she specifically asked us to you know, to mention this, but she is going to be on her YouTube stream, her YouTube channel, KiraChats, all one word, and I think she said it's either tomorrow or Tuesday. She's playing Helldivers with Nicotine, so go and do that. Go and follow her on there. That'll be really fun, won't it? She's going to be live streaming. Really cool. So
it's tomorrow at 8 a.m. Pacific Central.
there you go.
Oh wait, no, 8 a.m. Pacific, 10 a.m. Central. Yeah.
There you go.
There we
go. You go. Make sure you go and follow our sweet Kira. But thank you so much, everybody, for watching. And we will see you next week.
We will. See you then.
All right. Goodbye.